Hello and welcome to another edition of the In Context podcast. Today I'm joined with my good friend Steve Neal. How are you doing, Steve?
Yeah, I'm all right, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad, brother. Just looking for a local church to join. How about you?
Yeah, the same. The same. Yeah, we're on our way out of where we are, and we are going to be without a local church as of September. So we between now and September, we will ideally find somewhere.
Yeah. So, as you're still a pastor currently, I'm a former pastor, and I'm sure you were the same as me, encouraging local Christians to join a local church. But what happens if, like yourself, we are leaving a church that we were once pastoring and think it's best to have a fresh start after being in a ministry position for so long? Or if you move or live in an area where there is no local church, what are we supposed to do then?
Cry. No, it's difficult because generally, if you're a planter or you're revitalizing something, you've usually gone to plant or revitalize because in that area there isn't anything else. There are some exceptions to that. I do think it's different if you're in a city
Mm,
where you might have a very hyper localized place where you're doing your plant or revitalization for a whole load of legitimate reasons. And if that folds, there may be another church 5 minutes down the road that you can join. Um, our problem is, yeah, we came to an area to revitalize when there wasn't anything else really in the borough. Um, we even tried to plant another church that sadly folded a year or so ago
mm,
in another borough, so next borough up from us. That we frequently said if we had to move on for whatever reason, but we were still in the area, we'd probably go to that, but that isn't there now either. So you go there. There's actually nothing really in Rochdale we could easily go to. There's much in Ashton we could easily go to. At Oldham, we were here because there wasn't much here either. So you end up resigning yourself to go in. I'm going to have to travel somewhere.
mm.
Um, and we already have a few people who travel to us from where they are. Um, I don't think it's a biblical requirement um, to live within walking distance of your church or anything like that. I don't think the Bible puts a distance on how far away you live. Um, my concern is more how much can I be involved? So if all I can do is make it on a Sunday morning and then I go home and I just have no further interaction with the church for the rest of the week, that's not an that's not a great setup for a
Mm.
church. If I can be involved in the stuff midweek and see people throughout the week, I think that's better. I don't think it hugely matters if I do that from half an hour away or 2 minutes away, as long as I can do it. I
Mm.
think that's okay. So it's all a question of what is there, how far can you get, what's travel like in your area, um, and you just kind of have to go for the best option that's available to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's difficult as well. So for me, after 11 years of preaching most Sundays, being the main preacher and having to prepare a sermon and seeing Sunday is just an extension of the work week. For me, going to a church and not being involved and just being able to be fed and sit and listen to a sermon was something that encouraged me.
Mm,
The thought of not having to have any responsibility or midweek meetings was like, oh wow, this is good. I can relax and chill out a little bit, and the pressure's off. And selfishly, I was quite happy with the thought of being in a church that I didn't have to travel to very often, other than on a Sunday. I just was looking forward to a break, at least in the short term. But for my wife and children, they weren't as encouraged or as excited for leaving their church that they'd been invested in, for, especially my girls from being children. friends, family members, yeah, just people that grew up with. Suddenly they're leaving, the activities they were involved with, the outreach that they were involved with. It was a big haul for them. So it was hard for me to balance that desire of I just need a little break from being in pastoral ministry and enjoying being a member of a church without too much involvement. And uh, for my family who actually wanted to slot back into regular church life and be involved in the kind of things I had been for the last decade. And yeah, that's been the hardest thing for us as a family, I think, finding a church and getting that balance where we can be involved in weekly church life, but without having that ultimate responsibility where the buck stops with me. How have you found it? What is the, because you haven't left yet, what are some do you have any exciting thoughts for the future, or is it all doom and gloom? What is your family feeling like at the moment?
So I think in terms of what we'll do work, so most people know what I'll be coming and working with Medhurst, and taking on a director role there. We're all really excited about um, my sorry, I was about to phrase this horribly and I didn't mean it. I was going to say we're all really excited about my not being a pastor, which isn't quite what I mean. But generally, when we told my kids I wasn't going to be a pastor anymore, that they
Mm,
genuinely could not care less. And in all honesty, in terms of the job of being a pastor, I'm not unhappy to not be doing that. And moving into Medhurst and the role that we've worked together on, I think just plays to my strengths and plays to the things that
mm,
I'd be very happy with. So I think we're very excited about the new chapter work wise. Um, I think church wise, we are feeling quite a lot of those same things that your family were feeling. Um, the thing perhaps that's different for me is I love preaching.
mm,
I really like it. And I enjoy doing it. I like writing sermons. I like delivering sermons. I like talking to people about what I've preached about and all of that stuff. I love it, and I'm really gonna miss doing that. Um,
mm.
you know, certainly not doing it every week will be jarring, but even probably going into a position where I'm not really doing it at all for a bit,
Yeah.
or you're doing it every now and then. Um, that I think I'm going to miss a great deal because I like preaching and I think I'm all right at it.
Mhm.
Um, all the other bits of being a pastor, I don't think I'm going to miss at all. Um, so, so pretty well everything else that goes with it, I'm
Mm.
not troubled by at all. But preaching and teaching, that's what I like doing. That's what but I will get outlet for that in what I'll be doing with Medhurst. So it's not
Yeah.
entirely not doing that. I just think in terms of church, though, exactly the same otherwise as what you were describing, where my kids haven't known another church. I think my son spent 3 months of his life in the church we were at before we were sent up to Bethel. My daughter hasn't known any other church at all. We've got friends there. We've built links there. My entire life revolves around Oldham
Mm.
to the point now where I go to the town centre and I never fail to see people that I know and I can stop and chat with and engage with anytime I'm in town. I've had 12 years of a good, fruitful ministry here. And I think the thought of going to a church where we don't know anyone, you've got to start from scratch, making friends. Chances are we're probably going to have to travel. And the nature of our area is within Oldham, if you're in the borough, people would consider you local pretty much
Mm.
anywhere in the borough. Cross a borough's boundary and they're just like, it's another world. You
Mm.
know, it's not that we never ever go there, but it's not a place we tend to go, and vice versa. And I think if we end up at church in Manchester or Bury or Stockport or somewhere like that, the idea that people are going to come 40 minutes to come and see you and have an evening and hang out with you is just not likely. not we're probably not going to see people that much in the week if we're doing that. And
Mm,
I think that's difficult. Whereas the churches more locally, churches in Oldham, but I think all of them come with some significant issues for us. I think that would be difficult for us to talk.
mm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I used to manage a pub back in the day, and when I'd go out and visit other pubs, I'd often sit and think, oh, I don't like the selection of beers. I'm not happy with how they're displaying the glasses. The beer trays need emptying a bit more often than they're getting done, and the optics needs changing, and that crisp displays.
Mm.
I'd sit in the pub that I had. I'd learnt a certain way. I ran it a certain way, and I thought that was the best way to run it. So when I went into pubs that weren't being run the same way as mine, I'd often be hypercritical of it. And I think that can be similar to that as pastors
Mm.
and church planters, especially if you've been planting and revitalizing. So I spent 12 years pastoring a church that I'd planted, the way we did outreach, the worship we chose, the style of preaching and everything basically was heavily influenced by myself. And I'll imagine that was similar for you coming in as a revitalization. So how do we then, as pastors, when we go to other churches, kind of work out in our own minds, like first of all, accepting that this church is going to be quite different, or probably will be quite different to what we used to. How do we prevent ourselves from being hypercritical, especially in a negative way? And what would you say are the kind of preferences that we need to die for and be flexible with in order to find a church so that we can uh, move from the pulpit to the pews?
Yeah, and I think it's really hard, and it's going to differ for different ones of us. I mean, I don't know about your plant, but what I can tell you is, though my church was obviously heavily influenced by me and what I thought was good and right, I
Hmm.
think the idea that my church then met all of my preferences and desires and everything that I would have it doing is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, I remember someone coming into the church once and going, "Oh, you're the pastor, so yeah, this obviously runs exactly how you'd like it, doesn't it?" And I'm like, "No, no, it doesn't." But so even within a church like that, where you are the pastor, the point is we all have things that we go, look, that's something that I can't live with, and we're going to have to change that, and I'm going to
Mm,
make us change it. That's something that it's not my preference, but I can live with it, and it's fine. That's something I don't think is great, but I can tolerate it. That's something I don't think is great, and I can't tolerate. Do you know, we
mm,
all have that anyway, and I think we just have to kind of readjust that again. In many ways, I think it'll be easier for me when I'm not a pastor. So my issue when as a pastor is I feel responsible for the entire church. I find it much easier as a member of a church
mm,
that I'm not an elder in to go, all right, I wouldn't do that. I don't like, even on some theological stuff, I might go that that's not theologically where I would sit and what I would do. But, I'm not an elder, so I'm not responsible for it.
mm,
I can say I can submit to it. I can tolerate it as a member. I couldn't tolerate it as an elder, but I'm not an elder, so that's fine. So I think in many ways that some of that stuff gets easier.
mm,
But even then, we have our lines, don't we? So if a church is teaching heresy, for example, I'm not going to go there. Doesn't matter whether I'm a member or anything else. I'm not.
mm,
I won't be there, and I won't be having my kids being taught heresy. I think the other line I'd probably say is it might not be heresy, but if my sitting there under whatever it is that's on would mean I feel I am sinning by being part of it, then I would also probably not want to be there. And
mm,
I'd find that very difficult. So I'm trying to think of like secondary issues here where my sitting under it would be sinful. Because I can think of a secondary issue, for example, that as an elder and a pastor, I want to stand quite hard on, which is the issue of baptism,
mhm,
for example. Um, as a member of a church, if a church has open baptism and is happy to welcome pedo Baptists into membership, I can live with that as a member of a church. I can go along with it. It's not where I sit. It's not what I think should be done. It's not what I would do. But I can, if I'm not the elder responsible for it, I say, look, that's the elder's decision on that. I don't feel I'm sinning by sitting in the same church as somebody like that. But as an elder, I wouldn't want to sanction that. I would feel very, very uncomfortable indeed as an elder saying I think this is okay when I don't think that's what the Bible teaches. Whereas I think if, let's say, I went to an egalitarian church where they had women elders and women preachers, which I also don't think is right, I'd find that harder to say, I'm not an elder, I can submit to that because I would feel like sitting in the congregation to female preachers, I'm kind of participating in what I think the Bible says ought not to be done. So I think that those are certainly two lines I would have if I is teaching heresy and if my sitting in the congregation under the thing I don't think is biblical, I'm participating in it and joining in with it. I,
Mm.
I think I'd draw lines there. Apart from those two things, I'd probably have quite a broad range of stuff that I'd go, either it's biblical and I think is right, but I can submit to the elders on it, or I think these are just stylistic and preference sort of tertiary third order things, and I can just lump it. And unless it's absolutely killing my soul being there, I think I could probably rate it.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I think one of the problems for me is just when you mentioned killing your soul there, I was just reminded of it was quite
Quite a
easy for
broad
me.
category that in it as well.
Yeah. But I was with my role, I was often away uh, every other week. So twice a month, I would
Mm,
often be preaching in other churches. Uh, Sometimes over the summer, if I was traveling, I could be away for 3 or 4 weeks at a time at conferences. And it was fine for me to say to my family, look, it's not about preference, it's not about style, it's about we need to be part of a local body of believers. It's coming along to church is about submitting to the authority of God and
mm.
to one another as brothers and Christians, challenging and encouraging each other and supporting one another. And it's not just about being served. It's not just about looking and thinking, what can this church do for us, but what can we do for this church? How can will our tithe make a huge difference? Will our presence on a Sunday encourage the pastor? Can we encourage other young people if we've got children to join? So I was big on those things. My family were like, yeah, we agree with what you're saying, but it's all right you saying that when you're away for half the year and we have to
Yes.
stay here. So it's not just about our preferences, is it? Especially as men, if we're leading our family and
Mm.
encouraging our family, how do you get that balance between doing what is biblically right in supporting local congregations and not seeking to be purely served yourself, but also seeing to the spiritual and fellowship needs of your family as well? Because it's not just about is the Bible being preached, but it's about other meeting with Christians who are encouraging them and uplifting them during the week as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I meant by a church that's sort of killing your soul. I don't mean that in a sort of they're teaching you heresy kind of way. I
Yeah.
mean that more in a like I've been in churches, I've been member of churches in the past where things like it's not that the preaching is saying anything heretical, it's not that it's saying anything overtly unbiblical, but it is just so bland and tired and boring that you just get to a point where you're just like, I cannot bear sitting under this anymore. It's just gonna send me off on one. And it's like that where you go, biblically, is, you know, that kind of preaching wrong? Is it sinful? It's like, no. But is that the sort of preaching that you can tolerate for long? You can tolerate it for a bit, and you can
Mm.
certainly tolerate it as one-off sermons and stuff. But if I'm here for the next 10 years, sat under this, you
Mm.
know, I think I think it's legitimate to go, I just cannot tolerate that. I think equally, there's all sorts of cultural things that are factors, and I think, is it sinful? Well, I mean, something I think some of the ways that actually I'm thinking might be sinful. But I think there are ways if people just aren't kind to you and aren't very
Mm.
welcoming to you, and a lot of it may stem from cultural differences and stuff like that, which aren't sinful in and of themselves, but the way they then use those cultural differences to say effectively, I'm better than you,
Mm.
or you should be acting like me, you should be assimilating to our culture, um, or just making you feel different and other and whatever. Um, and depending on what it is and how regularly that's happening and how widespread in the church it is, you might tolerate it, or you might go, do you know what, but that is absolutely killing my soul. I've just got people being awful to me over constantly, and I just don't feel happy to subject myself to it. And I think we can often downplay it, particularly reform people. I think reform people are quite bad on this actually, and I'm sort of speaking myself and my own tribe and that. Very often when we talk about looking for a church, they're like, just find the one that preaches the Bible the best. Um, and yeah, I think that's good. I don't want to go to a church that teaches the Bible badly, but I think that's our like primary priority, we then basically overlook basic stuff like how the church love one another, whether they're
Yeah.
kind to one another, whether whether that's in evidence at all among people, and we just like make that one thing everything. And then any says, but people are horrible to me. And we're like, well, it's not really a very biblical reason to move somewhere else, is it?
Mm.
And I've actually come to the view I would probably take slightly less good preaching in a church where everybody's really nice and kind
Yeah.
to excellent A grade preaching, but everyone is just cold and unpleasant and not very nice to you. Um, so I think there's a balance between those things. There's probably a like an irreducible minimum
Hmm.
of all these things. So there's a certain level of preaching that if it falls below that, you're going, it's going to be really hard to sit here. And there's a certain level of kindness that if it falls below that, I'm going to struggle going here. And but assuming that a church is sort of above that minimum level, you know what I mean, on any of those areas, you're then just balancing, aren't you? You might go, that church is better at preaching, but they're not as kind. That church is more kind, but they're not so good at preaching. That church is better at evangelism or something, but they're and more culturally aware,
Hmm.
but they're not as kind, or whatever it might be. You're just then balancing it and trading it off and just going, what does my family need? Where could my family serve? Where could we be most helpful? Um, I think really I would be looking for a church if they love the Lord and they love the Lord's people. Um, they would be my two main kind of things I'd be looking for, and then I'd be looking for. I think what would swing it is where could we be most useful, most helpful. I think after those three things, I kind of go. It really does all fall under sort of preferences and broad stuff that I'd go, I might do it differently, I might like it differently. But
Mm.
ultimately, if they've got those three things, I think I could probably settle there.
Mm. Something that's got me thinking is I agree with everything you've said there, and kind of be my take on things as well as we uh, start looking where we're going to worship longer term. But it's got me thinking when I've been looking at churches in the developing world and in countries that would be Christianity would be an unusual religion for that country,
Mm,
whether it be somewhere like Pakistan or India or China even. And we think that we have limited options with churches in England,
mm,
especially in the north of England. Compared to the rest of the country, I would say the north of England does suffer through lack of churches. But compared to other countries, uh, they'd probably think we've got a good selection of churches to go to. And your preferences and style and things probably when finding the church in a one of these countries would be bottom of the list. You just go where there's a group of believers going and hope you don't get attacked for doing that. So
Mm.
on that level, I think you can be kind of less precious is that over preference. But what about your theological preferences, whether that be secondary or not? Uh, if you're limited by your church, if you're limited by transport, would you go to a Catholic church, an Eastern Orthodox church, a Wealth Health Prosperity church? Like, what kind of churches should we be going to if we have no other option, or should we just stay at home and have a house church?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is where you're prioritizing, isn't it? So you go, what are the options? Number one, I think, as I say, I wouldn't go to a church that teaches heresy.
Mm.
So I think that to me is a an absolute, but they're first order issues really. So if you say, oh, well, there's nothing else, I'll go to the local Catholic church. I'd be going, "No, look, they teach a false gospel. They're proclaiming a false gospel. I cannot say I'm in fellowship with it. I don't even count them as a church, in all honesty. So I would be going, no, I can't go here. I would say the same about the health, wealth, prosperity churches, depending on where on the spectrum they are. But I would say the majority of them, I'd go again, they're teaching a false gospel and they are transgressing, if you like, first order stuff where they're not even preaching the gospel anymore. And I think they're not really churches. So I would say you can't, I just couldn't go somewhere like that. Um, so then I suppose you go in, okay, well, what are the second tier things? And as I say, this is just how I cut it. I know some people would just go, well, if it's second order, where you're going, it matters and it's significant, but it's not gospel denying, then just put up with it if that's what's there. I think there's a case you could make for that. I think for me, I would go if I'm sitting there and my being there when the elders are saying this is what we're going to do, I'm not sinning by being in the room under it. Um, I would, and there's no other option for another church. I'd say, well, I'd tolerate that.
Mm.
If I feel like I'm sitting there and my sitting there is either affirming it or joining in with it or whatever it might be, um, I would struggle with that. So I think of like, let's say you've got, it's not a Catholic church, but let's say it's a Protestant church, but in their communion, they're teaching what I would consider to be a false view of what's going on in communion. Not saying it saves you
Mm.
quite, but they might be saying effectively transubstantiation is going on or something like that. Um, I would feel sitting there and taking that communion with them would be joining in and affirming that and being part of that. And I think I would be in sin to join in with that. So I think I would have an issue there. And I think, like I said, I couldn't only think of like women preachers or something. I think if I was sitting under it, listening to a woman preacher, even though it's not I'd be very clear that's not what I think should happen, not what I think is right. I would think by sitting there and not leaving, being part of that congregation, I'm effectively submitting myself to what I think is sinful. And I'd probably not do that. Um, but if I don't know, trying to think of a secondary thing, let's say they, yeah, let's say like open baptism or something, they welcome in people who have only had an infant baptism to membership. I don't think I'm sinning sitting in the room where that happens. I think if I was an elder permitting it and encouraging it, I might be, in my view, I'd be sinning to do that. But I think as a member of the church where that was happening, um, particularly if it was let's say it was an elder-led church where the congregation don't even have a vote on who comes in,
Mm.
um, I'd absolutely just go, look, that's the elder's position. It's not my position. I don't agree with it, but I don't think I'm sinning by sitting next to a guy who's doing that. Particularly if I think that person's a Christian, I don't think that's an issue. So that's how I would try and cut the secondary thing. tertiary stuff. I do like music preferences or whatever, or the whether they sing from hymn books or what Bible versions they use and all of that stuff. I would just go, look, certainly beggars can't be choosers. That stuff is irrelevant. I think you probably just have to put that to one side. But I think on secondary stuff it'd be if I'm sinning by sitting there and joining in, I couldn't go. If I'm just having to accept the elder's position on it, but I'm not personally sinning by sitting there, I'd probably tolerate it. I think
Mm.
that's how I would cut it.
Yeah. And I wonder, I wonder how many surveys have been done on why people leave churches. And I'd imagine a number of people leaving churches would be for tertiary issues rather than
Yep.
secondary or primary issues, wouldn't it? Sadly, in this country, often a lot of disunity comes from that tertiary preference, cultural or whatever that may be.
I mean, the irony is, isn't it, with tertiary things? So if you are leaving because they're changing the color of the carpet, and you're just like, it's just the most stupid reason you can think of. That's a problem. But I think disunity's an interesting one because I think tertiary issues can sometimes become primary issues.
Mm.
And it's not the issue itself that's the primary problem, it's the disunity. And
Yeah.
if brothers are treating brothers badly and refusing to repent over it and refusing to reconcile over it, I mean, ultimately you are forced into a position of leaving. But I just think it's very, very sad when that sort of disunity comes up over stuff that in reality just doesn't matter.
Mm.
And neither side is willing to go, look, I can put my preference to one side. I mean, I've got preferences about all sorts of things, loads of stuff. I mean, if you ask my opinion on a thing, I'll probably have one and I can probably give you one.
Yeah.
But most of it doesn't matter really. Most of it, if you're asking me whether would I rather this or rather that, I'll tell you. But I'm probably not going to leave a church over it. I'm probably not going to kick off if I don't get my own way on it because it's just not. They're just not that important.
Mm.
So I mean, for me and me and my wife are different on this as well. So like music in church is a good example. It has never ever bothered me ever. I mean, most music we sing in church isn't the style of music I listen to when I'm at home,
Mm.
particularly. I don't massively like most, by like it, I mean, I wouldn't listen to it at
Mm.
home. I'm grateful it's there because it helps me remember truth. I think but for me, a lot of church music is a bit like, you teach your kids the alphabet song to
Yeah,
learn.
yeah,
Yeah, I view church music a bit like that, which is it's tunes to help me remember stuff that is true.
mm,
And it doesn't matter whether I like the tune that much or not, and the style of it or not. If the tune helps me remember the truth, then it's doing its job. And um, but music wise, style wise, whether you sing out of hymn books, for me, music is just a pretty low priority for me in church. And I've sat in pretty well every style under the sun, and none of it's bothered me. Whereas my wife gets much more bothered about that. She finds music style and approach and that sort of thing quite important to her. Not not like first order, but it can really like ruin a service for her.
yeah,
Whereas for me, I would go. There's some that I think is a bit more odd than others, but it's on a personal level. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. And so I think that's the other thing to remember, isn't it? I may have my preferences and priorities of what I think is important, not necessarily the same as my wife and my children. And I think that's the other thing. We've got to try and find somewhere where we're all. It doesn't mean we'll all get our preferences met or we'll
yeah, yeah,
all have our priorities met, but we've got to go somewhere where, by and large, we are all happy enough, to be there.
yeah. Yeah. And find somewhere that's happy enough to have us as well. I think that's the hardest thing that we've had. Can we find somewhere that'll put up with me?
I'm really, really keen. I really don't want to go anywhere and be difficult. That's the other thing.
Yeah,
I think when you go to a church, you've just got to accept, whatever they do and however they are. If I'm going in as an outsider, it's not for me, is it, to go in and say, yeah, I should be doing this or you should be doing that, or I prefer this or I prefer that. I think I think there's a point where you can feel your way into it. I mean, are these things I can tolerate or not?
Mhm.
But I think once you've thrown your lot in and said, all right, I'm going to go here, then I think you've basically just got to go. Doesn't matter that I was a pastor. It doesn't matter what I what I think. I've just got to sit here and go, that's what I've joined and that's what I'm getting on with.
Yeah, well, exactly. And again, that brings me back to another pub analogy, public house or bar, if there's anyone from America. But uh, yeah, when I had a pub and people would come in and they'd ask for a pint of beer, and I'd give them it, they'd say, £1 62, it's only 1.48 in the cricket club. I'd be like, well, go to the cricket club then. Do you know what I mean? If you
Yes.
don't like it, lump it. So I wasn't one for customer service. If they weren't happy, do one. And I think that's kind of the attitude I try and take myself. If you're going to go somewhere, it is what it is, isn't it? If you're not happy, you
Yeah.
leave. You shouldn't go somewhere unhappy, wanting that place to change to suit you.
No. I mean, you can't look. You can go, and if you're asked your opinions again, if they ask you outright, do you like this thing or do you like that thing? I think you can say, and you can go, look, it's not what I would do, but um, it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, I think it's nuts. I know people who, they turn up to a Pentecostal church and complain. Everyone's talking in tongues. And you're like, well, what did you think this was? You
Yeah.
know, or they go to a Grace Baptist church and wonder why people who aren't like credo baptized can't have communion. You're like, but that's their thing. You can't
I
go
didn't
and
even
then
think
complain
about
about it.
baptism. When you said grace baptism, I was at Great Baptist. I was just thinking about chinos. I didn't think and loafers.
There's a lot of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, the clue was in the name, wasn't it? Grace Baptist. But yeah, for
That's
some
right.
reason, I don't think about baptism. Oh,
But I
class.
think it's that though, when you can't go and get upset with a church that is what it is, doing what it is, and then
Mm,
go, oh, I don't like this. I think you can go, that probably isn't the place for me,
yeah.
and not go there. But you can't settle there and then complain that it is what it is. It's that's what churches are. And I think to some degree, then everything's a trade-off, isn't it?
Mm,
Everything's a trade-off. What can I tolerate? What can't I?
yeah, definitely. So, are we any closer after that discussion to finding out where we're going to go then?
I mean, I'm not, but I think I suppose the other question is it depends why you can travel, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
depends what. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause if you can get anywhere in the country, and I'm not suggesting people should do this, but let's say you live in, I don't know, Brighton, and you're like, well, at a church I like in Edinburgh, so I'll go up there every week. You
Mhm.
know, if there is some way you can make that work and the church are happy and you're happy, you go, well, okay, fine. There's nothing in the Bible that says you've got to live next door to your church. I would question whether you could make that happy.
Mm.
But I'd also ask the question, if there's only one church in the entire country that you could possibly go to, I suspect the issue isn't that there aren't any any good churches.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we've got to think about that too. How far is it us just being picky,
Yeah.
and how far is it that there aren't churches, and then how far is reasonable to travel and be involved in a local church, and how far is it not?
Mhm.
And I don't think there's any solid answer to that. It all depends what's in your community, what's in your area, what churches are there, where your particular lines fall. But I think if you're basically going, there's a 50-mile radius and I can't find a single place to go, I think y y the issue might be you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even the boys in Clayton Mower don't have to travel that far to find
No.
somewhere. Oh, class. Oh, nice one, Steve. Well, we'll end there, and I think that's great. If you that might be the title of this podcast. If you can't find a church in traveling distance, the problem might not be the church; it's probably you. So, Yeah, I know a few people in Middlesbrough will agree with that statement about me. So
Well, there we go.
brilliant. Oh, cheers, bro. Thanks for joining me on the In Context podcast.
See you later.